We return to our top story, the collapse of talks at the second summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. We're joined by two people with broad experience dealing with North Korea. Jung Pak held senior positions at both the CIA and within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, dealing with East Asia. She's now at the Brookings Institution. And Frank Jannuzi was a State Department analyst and supported the U.S. delegation for talks with North Korea during the Clinton administration. He is now president of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation. And we welcome both of you back to the NewsHour. Frank Jannuzi, I'm going to start with you. What is your overall assessment of what happened with this collapse today?
Well, on the plus side, the two leaders avoided what I would call a catastrophic success. President Trump did not agree to a deal which might have included a partial limitation on North Korea's nuclear program in exchange for widespread sanctions relief. I think that would have left the United States in a negotiating position that was quite weak to accomplish the ultimate goal of complete denuclearization. Also on the plus side, the two parties did narrow some of their differences. We now know that North Korea is prepared to take meaningful steps toward denuclearization in exchange for partial sanctions relief. But I think what happened here was perhaps a little bit of a U.S. overreach, trying to put facilities beyond Yongbyon onto the negotiating table for the first time in a way that may have taken the North by surprise, and also a North Korean miscalculation about Trump's willingness to get a deal at any cost.
Jung Pak, miscalculation on both sides. How do you see it?
I do see it as miscalculation on both sides. I think the two men were so confident in their relationship and in their ability to go into that room and to strike a deal that would be beneficial to both of them, that they really did not anticipate the other side not giving in. And I think what happened was that Kim also overreached and that he is faced his first diplomatic failure of sorts.
Frank Jannuzi, President Trump has placed a lot of hope over the last number of months in coming up with some kind of deal with North Korea, no matter whose responsibility it was what happened. How much of a disappointment is this for the United States?
Well, I think the president, for certain, is massively disappointed. He flew 7,000 miles. He ended up with a fizzle of a summit. But what will be important is what happens next. And Kim Jong-un has already signaled, just in recent minutes, his continued optimism about the process, and he anticipates another meeting with President Trump. And I think for President Trump, he should avoid the mistake the U.S. made in 2002. At that time, at a time of tension in the relationship, the U.S. pulled back from dialogue and negotiations with North Korea, and it set in motion a period of North Korean escalation of their nuclear program. So we need to remain engaged.
So, Jung Pak, though, is there the appetite to do that on the part of the United States after this very spectacular disappointment?
I think so. The president left the door wide open for additional conversations, and I think that's a good thing. He said that it wasn't a hostile walking away, but that it was a friendly walking away. And the North Korean statements so far suggest that they're also interested in talking further.
How much does it matter, Frank Jannuzi, that there are two really different explanations from the two sides about what happened?
Well, it's not so uncommon, unfortunately, when you have a new team on the U.S. side to have disagreements about what has just transpired. But I think what is more important than their different interpretations of whether the U.S. overreached or whether the North Koreans insisted on too much sanctions relief, I think what's more critical right at the moment is that we do have a narrowing of the differences over which facilities are crucial. The U.S. has basically said we need to get a handle on all fissile material production, plutonium and uranium enrichment anywhere in the country. And the North has acknowledged that they're willing to do that in exchange for only partial sanctions relief. So we have still the basics for a deal.
But if there were the basics for a deal, the question is, Jung Pak, why couldn't they make some progress when they were together face to face?
I think what's striking to me is that the two sides had a convergence of interest, and that was in the peace treaty or peace declaration and a liaison office, and Kim walked away from that. So what that suggests to me is that Kim is not interested in peace and normalization as he is in sanctions removal.
So but what does that mean? I mean, that for all the conversation about that he's not leveling. I mean, how do you explain?
Yeah, I think what that says is that Kim wants to drag this process on so that he can further cement his status, his claimed status as a nuclear weapons power. It boosts his legitimacy, and it also increases his standing in the international community, as well as his strategic relevance.
This final point is critical that Jung Pak has made. For President Trump, the summit should be about denuclearization, but for Kim Jong-un, it's really about legitimacy, prestige, and a sense of security. And this is why he will have third summit, fourth summit, fifth summit, because each summit actually bestows a certain amount of additional legitimacy and stature upon this North Korean dictator.
But is that in the interest of the United States to have summit after summit after summit
Only,
if it's not going anywhere?
Only if it leads to concrete steps, which is why I would hope that this summit should have been better prepared in terms of having an agreement in place before the two leaders met. If there's going to be a third summit, you should be darn sure that the working level talks should nail down what's going to happen before it happens. And maybe that's part of the learning curve of this president.
Right. I hope if there is a next summit, and I suspect that there will be a next summit, that we let the working level discussions move forward and advance the conversation rather than having the two leaders in the room again, so we could have another set of status quo situations. So I think the lesson learned here is that the top level leadership conversations are good. They're okay for maintaining goodwill and momentum, but the working level processes are just as important, if not more.
But just quickly, bottom line from both of you, you believe the will is there to get to make progress, to get something accomplished, to get an agreement?
Yes, I do. I think Kim is interested in getting the sanctions removal, and the fact that he pointed to these sanctions from 2016 and 2017 points to the fact that that's our leverage point. And without the military option out of the picture, sanctions are our only option and leverage.
And I agree, and I think for President Trump, he wants it as a re-election accomplishment. He wants some form of peace and denuclearization, and he cannot afford to let this nuclear threat linger indefinitely.
Frank Jannuzi, Jung Pak, we thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.